Alright, hello everyone, welcome to Midweek Gaming. I'm Nick, and sadly not on the other side of the comms is Justin, just checking to make sure this is going. I actually had to record this a second time now because I had the whole thing done and forgot to press record because I was messing with hotkeys. But anyways, back to the show. So as I was saying, Justin is not with us this week because he's off on family things, so he'll be gone for this week and next. So it'll just be you and or me and all of you for the next coming 2 weeks. So, hope you enjoy my voice. But that won't affect our daily or weekly scheduled content, so don't worry about that too much. But yeah, just so you know, if you don't hear Justin on the other side, or if you don't hear background or see background gameplay, that is why. So, finally back to the regularly scheduled programming. So, EA, let's talk EA. They did an oopsie, or big oopsie, about a tune of $38 million in terms of an oopsie. Well, I would say oopsie, but I'm sure for the executives who made the oopsie, it's a pretty good thing. For those who aren't aware, as you can see on top of the screen if you haven't read it, after a massive success of Battlefield 6, which if you look over here came out in like what, yeah, 2015, October 10th, 2015, so not even a year at this point. After the massive success by that game, they laid off a ton of people, and you would think that'd be a sad time, but as you can get into reading, EA CEO paid out 38 million despite the fact. So, yeah, fun. Let's get into it. He's not the only one who made a massive chunk of change. We actually have a bit here. This article is actually from PC Gamer. We got another one we talk about from GameSpot. Both will be linked down in the description below. So if you want to read those, go right ahead. I would encourage it. But yeah, we actually have a breakdown here that we'll talk about in a minute, which is actually the official fiscal year report that actually shows the compensation plan for said executive, including Wilson himself, CEO. But again, we'll get to that. So let's just run it down. So, Battlefield dropped, like I said, in about 2025, and despite everything being a massive success, they decided to nonetheless lay off an undisclosed number of people. So, we don't know how many people got laid off, the team that worked off the game, but we know that it is nonetheless an undisclosed amount, probably not. That would just be my guess. And also, I forgot to mention this the last time I did the recording, laid off the entire team working on an all new, more story focused game in the series. So, yeah, that entire team that was working on a future project is also gone. I'll just open this up and. Oh, and it was a Halo co creator, too. See, I'm learning stuff as just as you guys are, live, no less. This will also be linked down in the description below. If you guys want to read that, I won't be covering too much of that because it wasn't planned for the video, but, whatnot. But just for time constraints, let's move right along. So, despite the massive layoffs, it did not stop the executives from throwing a massive chunk of change their way, specifically the way of Andrew Wilson, the CEO, which, as we can see here, by the breakdown, is pretty sizable. His pay, salary-wise at least, is only $1.25 million, so 1.3 million, which is still eye-watering. And it has been like that for the last 3 years. However, his end pay has actually been quite different because if you actually look in bonuses, which are just stuff he's given on top of his salary, he made 28 million, almost 28.5 million, in fact, just in stock awards alone. So stock options, effectively. Non-equity, if you're not aware, includes things like, cash compensations and stuff like that. Hey, you did well, here's an extra grand and something else. And this can include a variety of things, but generally I'd imagine things like cash. Because again, equity refers to strictly stocks, which as we can see is its own category entirely, which in his case came out to a tune of 6.5 million, so a lot more than a grand. And then there's all other compensations, which these can just be things that the company allows, private security, travel expenses, anything that he can write off and the company will agree to pay for comes down to this, and that also classifies as compensation pay. So, putting all of those numbers together, including his salary, you go from 1.25 million to, as you can see here, 38.5 million, over 38.5 million. Which, oh boy, that's a massive pay bump from only 1.25 million, don't you think? It's about 37. That's about an extra 37 mil more, I'd argue. which itself had gone up an extra 8 million from the year before, which, as we mentioned, wasn't because salary, because you can see that was consecutive for the last 3 years. So it's all having to do with this. And I imagine the stock awards especially will become more valuable as time goes on, particularly soon, but we'll get into that later. He's not, however, like I said, the only executive to pocket a massive chunk of change. In this list, you can also see that we have the chief financial officer, the president, a fellow by the name of Laura Millet, and Malay Singh, Chief People Officer, who I believe counts as HR head. It might be wrong, might not be wrong. I think it's HR though. And Jacob Schwartz, who is the Chief Legal Officer. So basically, the guy you ask when you think you might get sued. So yeah, let's just run down the list and see what they're making, because it's also pretty eye-watering, as you can see. But hey, let's go over it individually. So, starting from the bottom, we have Jacob Schwartz, again, the legal officer. He made in this year's salary $650,000. Pretty nuts. And again, this is all in USD, mind you, I believe. But his actual stock awards for this year were almost 8 million actually, $6,772,570 in stock options. So however much stock that buys him, which, I mean, if you want the number to that, just check whatever EA stock is trading at the moment and you'll get your answer. His actual equity, or not equity, excuse me, his non-equity payouts totaled out to $1 million, so an extra $1 million possibly in cash bonuses. And finally, his other compensation, which again can be pretty ranged and pretty broad. It's whatever the company will allow them to pay for, allow them to write off, and will pay for them on behalf. Totals to about $35,000, bringing his total compensation for the year up to $8 million. Oh boy. Quite a jump from from a salary of only 650. Yeah? Going up the list once again, we have the chief people officer, Maala Singh. I believe I pronounced that right. Forgive me if I'm not. I try to get names right, mostly because I know my own last name can be so difficult to pronounce. Anyways, salary, much like the legal officer, sits at 650,000, but the equity given in stock, while that might also be the same, the rest is not. In fact, the actual non-equity stock is only about 100,000 less than our fellow beneath us, said legal officer, coming at about $900,000. And of course, there's the other compensations, which again, whatever they'll agree to pay, is only about $80 less than the guy below him, or the fellow below them, which totals to another 8 million. So we now have two 8 millions on top of, like I said, the extra 38 that the executive or CEO was paid. Going up the list again, we have the president, Laura Millet. They made a total of $825,000 in salary, which has been fairly consistent, as you can see, over the last 3 years. I mean, the first 2024 year listed here is only $820,000, which I know some people are sitting there going, only 820. I wish I could live off that salary, and yeah, a lot of us could. It just shows you how nuts these executives get in terms of bonus pay. But anyways, moving along, the actual stock options given were 11 and a half, just over 11.5 million. The financial pay in terms of cash and stuff like that, 1,200,000, and again the write-offs totaling about 13,000, which brings us to a total of 13 million. Oh boy. And finally, just before Andrew Wilson himself is Stuart Canfield. I don't know why I struggle to pronounce that for some reason. The chief financial officer, the money man. He makes $740,000 a year according to the salary claim. However, his stock awards come up to $9 million. His non-equity pay, so again cash, comes up to $1,500,000, and all other compensation packages come up to $25,000. Finally, totaling a compensation package overall totaling $11 million, $11.25 million, which is just nuts. So yeah, between all of these executives alone, all of these final tallies, if you do the numbers, you're looking at, if my back of the napkin math is right, somewhere in the neighborhood of like $60 million, somewhere around that lame. Wait, let me just do that again in my head, just to make sure. Yeah, it would be somewhere in the tune of $60 million, roundabouts, which, oh boy, kind of nutty if you ask me. just between five people they can rake in $60 million. And if you're wondering where exactly the non-other compensation pay came from, at least for Wilson, the article here actually kind of breaks some of that down. In fact, I believe it is here. Yes, here we go, where it is actually said that an assessment conducted in 25 recommended that Wilson use private air travel for all personal travel as well as business travel, so he can do business as well as pleasure as a company benefit. And the result was that he was permitted to use the corporate aircraft for personal travel, subject to a 35-hour cap. So how long they'll let him do it for, they won't allow it anymore, which ended up costing the company alone $1 million. $1,245,000, $946 just in travel costs. Ay, ay, ay. So if you're wondering where that where this came from, well now you know. Now you know. It mostly things like air cap and stuff like that. Excuse me. Which is absolutely outrageous. Again, the article goes into more about the actual pay bump that he had compared to previous years, increase of like 170 to 1 ratio from previous years. We won't go too much into the nitty gritties because I think after going through this, we've seen enough numbers of pay for one day. But suffice to say, him and the other executives made a eye watering amount. Just six of them, or excuse me, five of them, yeah, five. I don't know why I had to count that. Just to be safe, raked in like 60 million in total in terms of pay, which is absolutely nuts because as I remind you, they laid people oops, they laid people off of the teams that did things like Battlefield, which was a massive success. So yeah, just because you make something successful, I guess in this market does not mean anything in terms of job security anymore. Whenever they need to tighten the belt, the employees are the first thing to go, regardless of if you did well or not. Which is only going to get tighter as the years as time goes on. And as I mentioned when I said those stock options are going to get even more juicy as time goes on, because that brings us to the second article of the day, or second co-fact of today, which is, yeah, the Saudi deal for EA closes next week, specifically on August 4th, just August 4th, not even time of this recording, just in general, which is next week, as the article itself also points out. Which is going to be nuts because that means that the Saudi Arabian government is basically going to own EA, literally. EA will become a private corporation again, and it will be under the group of investors led by the Saudi Arabian government, which. That means several things. A, it means there's going to be an absolutely massive chunk of change listed on EA because there's a massive amount of debt being leveraged for the sake of the buyout. I think it's. Oh, no, here we go. $55 billion deal. So $55 billion is going to be the amount of debt saddled on EA's table once the deal goes through. And it also mentions how Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is also part of the acquisition with his own private firm, Silver Lake and Affinity Partners. Yeah, which Saudi, the the Trumps, it just looks like a wonderful cocktail for corruption, if you ask me. But anyways, getting back to the regularly scheduled program, politics aside, it's going to make things even worse because, like I said, they're going to have to pay off that $55 billion somehow because it's all going to come in the form of basically debt that they're taking on to allow the buyout. I'm not going to go into the specifics of leveraged debt, but suffice to say that that is what's going to happen. And yeah, they're going to have to pay that off somehow, which is going to get nuts to say the least. As for why those stock options are going to get better, well, once the company becomes private again, all outtraded stock is going to either be bought back or just get extremely more profitable. I imagine it's just going to get more profitable, which means that little stock that's left is going to just astronomically bloom in value. So it means that it's probably either going to get sold off by the executives or kept on, and they're going to get whatever dividends are effectively held off because there's no longer going to be any publicly traded stock running through the market. So yeah, it's going to be nuts to say the least. As the article itself actually points out that this buyout comes as a particularly tumultuous time for EA, including, as we mentioned before, the several mass layoffs and canceled projects in recent years. much of the resources have been funneled into key franchises, particularly the aforementioned Battlefield. So, yeah. It also kind of interesting mentions a side point we can go into where critics remain concerned that the Saudi government's involvement could influence the themes and values present in EA games, perhaps most prominently the Sims series, which again makes sense. Not to get too political, but I believe Saudi Arabia has very conservative views on many things when it comes to just in general, if I remember correctly, including views on like women's rights and just sexuality in general. And if you played The Sims, you know that you can just do a ton of crazy stuff in The Sims, just in general. You can do some off the wall stuff in that game. So who knows if any of those more crazy things that you can do will just get toned down to kind of comply with Saudi Arabia's position on a lot of those on a lot of those ideals, which wouldn't be the first time we've seen a government censoring things to kind of keep with their policies, which it would be a shame to see that happen to The Sims, but honestly, at that point, that would just seem like the greater collateral in the picture. But sucks to be a Sim player if that happens. Let's hope it doesn't, though. But again, interesting point to mention. But we're kind of here for the massive pay problems, which, yeah, as I said, is definitely going to get the belt is definitely going to get tighter as that $55 billion debt needs to get paid off eventually, and banks are not going to be in the habit of waiting. So imagine a lot of the games coming out of EA are just going to get monetized to hell and back going forward. But that's the later problem. We'll deal with that whenever that bridge comes to it. But yeah, that's the video for this week. Took a little longer this week because I was actually debating about doing the whole business with Sony. If you're not aware, there was a massive just fall of the PSN network for several, I think like a day or something, or like a little bit. And yeah, certainly wouldn't be too surprising if not for the fact this also came on the back of the whole diskless announcement, which, for what little of Sony's reputation is left in the gaming space, just not good, not good. Puts the whole thing into the toilet. So thought about covering that, but as I was getting all the notes ready and everything for the video, I saw this whole shenanigan come up. So I thought that since this is hot off the news and since this is very, oops, wrong article. Again, will be available in the description if you want to read this one. But again, considering this deal literally closed next week, I thought that this would be more apropos and more, shall we say, on brand, or more prompt, shall we say. I can't think of the right word for that. But anyways, that's this week's video. Also, side note, it's kind of funny how we're talking about The Sims and its possible impact by the Saudi government, and we literally get the Sims wiki ad here, which, oh man, that's just too perfect. But anyways, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all found it interesting, and we'll see you all next week. And just again, remember, it'll just be me for this week and next week. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I was gonna go with somewhere, but anyways, just so you guys know. Anyways, like, subscribe, you know the program. Every little bit helps. I want to get this channel really up there. Hope to get to 100 by the end of the year. We'll see if that happens. And finally, that's the video. Bye-bye, everybody.